There's a lawnmower going outside, so what you're listening to right now is ADR, which is why you can't hear the sound of the camera stand shaking. Now I've got 3 pieces of pine right here that are 6 feet each. I'm going to turn 2 of them into a shelf that will go alongside my bed, and the other one will be made into a set of bench hooks in a future video. This one is the straightest one. That's probably going to be what I turn into the bench hooks, so this is going to be set aside for that future build. The bed itself is 6 feet long, so I'll decide between these two, which I'm going to make into the shelf part and which I'm going to make into the supports. It's going to be a very simple build, just held together with joinery and slotted together. I think I'll choose this one for the supports because of this nice looking fat wood right here. You can see that the pine resin and sap is very close to the surface of the wood, which creates an amber effect, which is very cool looking. I'm going to have to give it 5 support legs, 1 at each end, and then 3 in the middle. The ones at the ends are going to come out at an angle to prevent them from racking, so they'll have to be made slightly longer. I just have to cut all the slots for them to sit into and then turn this into support legs. Let's get to it. The first thing I'm going to do is knock the hard corners off the edges because I had my jack plane in storage for a while and I had the blade retracted all the way, so I need to get that tuned up. I have the wheel spun up to where the blade is almost coming out, and I have a piece of scrap wood from a previous project lined up with a bench dog that will keep it in place while I do my tuning. I'm going to take a test stroke, and then I'm going to give it 1 adjusting twist and repeat 1/4 twist at a time until I start to get some friction. I'll back it off and retune it again later in this video for a different task. Got a hint of a shaving. I'm looking into the plane to see where it is. It's on that side. Now I'm going to take my adjustment lever and try and center that part of the blade by sighting down it. I'm sighting down the body, moving the lever back and forth, and as I do that, it visibly changes where the glint of light is. I'll put that in the center and give it some more test strokes. Now I'm going to advance it a tiny bit more, just from there to there. Now the reason it isn't drawing broad shavings is because there's a camber, a curve in the blade, because it's meant to take out larger amounts of material at once. That's what I have this blade tuned for because I have 2 jack planes. If I only had the one, I'd tune it less shovel-shaped and instead closer to perfectly flat like my other plane. I'm exaggerating with my hand gestures here. To make sure it's fit to chamfer corners off, I'll test it on this scrap piece. We're going for a thin, shallow shaving, and the corner is much nicer to touch now. There's a thin, shallow shaving. Yep, much nicer to touch. So, since this board is going to be the main board of our shelf, what we have to do to it mostly is knock off these hard corners. So I'm going to do that right now. I have it in my soft jaws, which are just kind of sitting on there. And first I'm going to try it with just the 2 passes right here on both sides of that edge. Then I'm going to test for comfort down the board and flip it around. Now 2 strokes didn't quite do it and I had to touch it up. So on the other side, I'm going to do it in 3 strokes. One that's really shallow to the edge, one that's really shallow to the face, and one that's at 45 degrees. That doesn't look quite so nice, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit it with my plane right here, which can be difficult if you don't have it tuned properly. With my knife, I'm going to make a little cut underneath the edge right there. And that's going to prevent too much tear out as I'm going over it. Now for whatever reason, I've always found it easier to plane end grain on the pull stroke rather than the push stroke. So I've been doing that. Your other, and in my opinion slightly more difficult option, is to use a file to go over the edges. This is difficult because it's easy to take an uneven amount of material off of the surface, like this, so, to either get it to cup or to get it to bow. And it's easy to get an uneven surface this way and make it rounded, and you wind up with a sort of a dome shape. So you're going to have to be careful and check it with a square on the regular. If for whatever reason either your plane isn't sharp enough to cut from end grain, or if you just suck at it, then go with the file and clean it up after that. We're going to take the corners off. It's very effective. Gotta get the very points too. You don't have to press very hard because the teeth will do all the work. Look at all of that. Now that is perfectly in the middle. So in order to accommodate the thickness of one of these 3/8 inch pieces of board that's going to go right here, I have to come out 1/4 and 1/4 is a half, so I need to add an 1/8 to that. I will make a little mark on the 3/8 in either direction. Okay, so I feel like the board should be in about that far, so I'm going to put it at exactly 4 inches because that's a nice convenient spot to put that. I'm going to get it around to the flat side, right there. And then I'm going to back the camera up because it's on a fairly unsteady surface. Forgot to come up 3/4. I'm going to have it actually stop at 4 inches right there. So 4, half, 3/4. Now, the shelf itself needs to be 14 inches off the ground, so I'm going to mark out the first leg. And 14 inches is right there. I'll make a little mark. right here that I've wandered a little bit, despite my marking lines. So I'm going to look on the other side, and it looks like I'm okay. Now I'm going to be more careful as I'm getting close to the end, and this is why it's also good to be able to saw with both hands. I'm not applying any weight, just back and forth, nice and easy. And eventually, cut free. Okay, let's check my... What do we do? Pretty good. Okay. Now, let's do the next line. Gotta flatten the bottom. When I do this, my weight is on this part here, because the flat bottom will square itself to the board. A little high on this side, a little high on the corners. I'm going to pull and then lift. This side is already fairly flat, so I'm just going to hit with the file. Got a little bit of a measuring error here, so I'm going to square these boards to each other. Mark that, and then bring this down. Next up, I have set this to 10 degrees off of square, and I'm going to bevel that right there. To be the foot of the two on the ends, which are tilted outwards. I'm going to do this here, and then get that down, and then I'm going to measure it and see how tall it's going to have to be. I put the bevel on both sides, and I have the mark extending out a little bit. And I'm going to use the combination square to bring that all the way across as a guide target when I'm planing this down. Okay, let's see how I did. It's a little low on this side for there, but I'm not super worried about it in this particular case. Alright, so let's get that off and make ourselves a little triangle. Okay, I did it the way that I did because I wanted to take off as little wood as possible from the bottom there so that I could get that standing flat. There, and then see how high up this got. And I'm going to go ahead and use my speed square on this side to ensure that this part is up straight as well. Okay, now you could do this with trigonometry, but I don't want to, because that involves like sines and cosines, and nope, not for me. Or at the very least, I don't feel like it right now. Okay, so I marked a little line. So I marked a line. The line wound up right there. From there to there gives me an extra about 3/8 of an inch. Okay. Now the way that we're going to do the rest of this is we're going to use the bevel gauge. Let's see. Get this off there. That's in a good spot. I'm going to find the corner of that and I'll mark the... Okay, so I cut this square and then planed it to the angle. The other side was actually pretty good. I don't know what happened with the one that's over there, but this is going to wind up being the top now. So that's going to face that way, and the other one is going to be on the other side. Now, okay, so I'm probably going to stretch this project out over 2 days because I've been at this for way too long. So I'm going to take a chunk out of the middle there, make 2 cuts straight down, and then angled to a line that I'm going to mark there. Not terribly deep, and then I'm going to get that middle section out, and it will sit on either side of the main shelf board. Okay, so I got to mark and cut all of those. Got the marks from there transferred up, and now going to give it a nice square. Okay. Cut a little too far there, but that's alright. Okay. 4 more. So, I took one of the beveled pieces and I made a series of relief cuts here that go down to the line because that knot would be a problem for the way that I want to take these chunks out. I want to do that with a chisel, so series of relief cuts, that way it's easy to just break that right there. And the relief cuts are done square instead of on the bevel so that I don't risk going down too far. Now that we have this piece chiseled out here and flattened with a file, now we're going to do this piece, and there's no knots in this piece, so I'm going to have a much easier time of it. And the way that I'm kind of like backdoor cheating is I have the bevel from the previous piece as an angle guide. So I can lay it flat on this, and I'm going to want to have that pinned down, actually. There we go. That seems to have bounced that up. Let's get that flat to itself. Okay, we're away and flying. And in the end, this is going to require a lot less cleaning up. Okay. Well, see you on the other side. So at long last, here is our completed shelf that's sitting up. The skewed legs prevent racking in either direction by a very nicely resisting lateral force. The supports sit pretty well in there. I lost some footage for this where I had cut the slots and they were all too thin, so I took a chisel and pared down the edges there until they would fit. It was particularly important with these because these I actually did with a skew cut with a saw. I'm still trying to improve my sawmanship skills. It was easier for me to intentionally cut these too thin so that if it started to wander out that way, I could correct it back in to line with what it's supposed to be, and then just clean it up with a chisel later. And then I had such a nice momentum going that I continued to do it for the rest of the, went a little off on this one, but continued to do it for the rest of these. Yeah. I am leaving the wood raw. I am not going to finish it because I don't really need to. I would much rather be able to use it immediately, and it's made to have its pieces easily replaced if something were to tarnish or break or whatever. Function is form. I care more about using it than I do about it being nice, because as I say in a lot of my videos, everything that I make for myself is either way above production quality or way below it, and this happens to be on the below side. That's not to say that it's totally without its artistic flourishes. The fat wood is exposed right here, and I have on a lot of the legs, the darker colored wood that has more of the sap in it is outward facing me, and the lighter colored wood, with the exception of this one leg right here, is to the inside there. And it's an exception here because there happens not to be a darker colored patch stretching down this far on the board. All the surfaces are nice and clean. Okay, that wraps up this project.